Good morning from Ridgewater. Today, local officials, business owners, and residents gather along Main Street as Ridgewater begins the next stage of its public growth. What started as a small roadside town is now preparing for a larger role in the county. New homes are filling in around the community, local businesses are expanding their footprint, public services are taking shape, and Main Street is beginning to carry more than traffic. It is becoming the front door of Ridgewater County. This next phase is about more than construction. It is about giving Ridgewater a stronger civic center, a better commercial base, and the public spaces needed to support a growing population. The county seat will bring new activity into town, strengthen the local economy, and give residents a clearer center of public life. For the Chamber of Commerce, this is the kind of growth Ridgewater was built for. Practical, visible, and rooted in the community already taking shape. Today we break ground on the next chapter of Main Street. A place for business, a place for services, a place for residents, and the beginning of a civic center built to serve a working county. Welcome back to Ridgewater County. Alright, so before we get started, let's kind of check out what the town's telling us after we just wrapped up our high school and apartment additions, and we have an industry side apartment over there. So we've kind of shifted our town focus just slightly now that we have such a high school district and, starting to build population on this side of town. But, so I think we definitely have grown past our little starter Main Street strip. While I think it definitely still fits this side of town very well. This side is kind of showing us that moving out of town kind of vibe, so I think it still fits it very well. But I do think that it's kind of come time to kind of expand and fill it on out and go ahead and start to look to somewhat center up on this side, but still keep it one cohesive street. So I think one step we can definitely take is kind of establishing our first town here as the county seat. Even if we develop larger towns, big, medium-sized towns as we expand the region, I still think that this town still makes sense to be kind of that county seat. So let's take a quick look at a few things. We just kind of fired up on the education pipeline. We're pushing it. Right now, some of that has to do with just fresh move in. Same here. It's just now been available. Outside of that, traffic's still holding very good. Now, we'll start to test that as we start to really add commercial growth and start to really need a transfer of population back and forth a little bit. But at 88, that's a good, comfortable zone to start on. And, I think overall we're still sitting okay in power. We are going to have to break out of this. And right now, as you can see, these are basically our transformers. And that's actually not generating any power, that little substation. This one is, I like to keep these within reason. Places that make sense. These two might be a little much. This is more entering neighborhoods. I think that makes sense. High school makes sense. Apartment complex makes sense. And everything out in the industrial parks makes sense. So, I think we're okay there for now. We will have to figure that out one day. Probably, I would imagine when we start to look to expand into the second town. Sewage is going to be our battle. It's definitely trending to redeveloping the sewage system, or maybe we get lucky and push it to where we can establish a larger one in another town to help offset. Garbage is still looking pretty good. I think we have I wouldn't say we're a total regional processing center by any means, but we have a very strong footprint there. So I think that we're in good shape for this expansion, and I think we're definitely well past due to get back over into this side of town and get it kind of developed and matching with what we have over here. But let's just kind of dive on in. We can probably just start expanding just straight across, and that'll kind of let us build more organically, make it more cohesive as we go. So I think we'll start over here. We'll get this filled in here, and then we might touch a few different places and maybe change a little layout. I kind of think that this four-way intersection could be adapted a little differently. So let's go ahead and start laying down some buildings, some commercial, a little, good mixtures. I think what we're missing right now, outside of some local eateries, is starting to be that fast food chain feel. There's always some fast food, and we probably oblige that, and a gas station, especially right on the intersection. I think that's very realistic placement for one, and I also kind of think that out there, I also kind of think that a Dunkin' Donuts beside, sometimes they're built in, but for the most part I think we're in good shape there. Let's back this thing up just a bit and just kind of make that look like one. And then we'll probably need a little bit of parking. We'll just stick with the vanilla one. And that's probably where we can shift this over just a little. Get this attached a little more over here. It gives us a little separation, a little room for some road frontage detailing. And I think that gives us a pretty good cross right here. You can definitely see some traffic movement going on now with this four-way intersection. Which, speaking of, we don't have a stoplight. Which is a little strange. We definitely should just put one in. That's a little bit too much traffic, a little too many turns, a little too much pedestrians for just mayhem. Well, let's flip to the other side of the road. I think right over here we can kind of extend this older building, older town kind of vibe just a little bit. Just kind of keep that progressing before we get into any kind of larger development, newer development look. But I think we can definitely transition to that pretty quickly and start to show that newer expanded growth, that little bit bigger, a little bit more income coming in. And I think that'll look okay touching. Yeah. And then we'll go ahead and put one more fast food chain in. And I think we can nudge this off the road just a little bit. And I think that'll kind of complete our exit out of town here. So I think that kind of fills it in nicely, kind of makes it look busier, some upper developments, some national chains coming in before you get into the more older original town. So right now we just have a few cemeteries kind of placed around here and there. This one's starting to look like it's going to max. Then So really, we have nothing on this side of town. One of the detailing phases, I threw one in right here, which I think off the farm kind of makes sense in this more wooded patched area. It's doing okay. So I think we can definitely add in another. And I think we can kind of tuck it in right here off the school a little bit. And that'll give us, scoop this over a little bit. That'll give us a little bit of working footprint on this side of town. Well, we do have a little bit of lacking power. But that gets us a little bit of footprint over there. And I think this is where we can cut this road out. And let's get these back on, except for grid. And I think we can kind of put it puts close nose, but we are just kind of in neighborhood traffic here. And I do that because we are going to end up maxing our cemeteries out, even with the 3, and you know, we still can put some more around for support, but we do need to start moving those a little differently. So I think we can go ahead and put in a crematorium. It 16,000 to me is a tad extreme, but you know, for that type of service. But I also don't think it breaks our realism in the process. We're still relying on the majority of coverage coming from normal cemeteries, but this does give us a way to keep those cemeteries clean as we continue to progress and continue to build. So, but I do think that a couple spots is definitely not going to be enough. So we'll add a parking lot and probably bump that off just a little bit. So I think that puts us pretty good shape over here. I think we can make this look a little bit more happening, more movement, and a little bit more buildings than just tents. So I think we can add us one of these, which look like just a nicer, more permanent structure for the same concept. And then kind of add a few here. I think that gives us a little bit more fullness to this area and gives us a permanent structure, and we can do some detailing around it. So I think that'll kind of give us a little bit of a busier farmer's market and make it look a little better. So I think that's probably about as far as we want to go on this side of downtown, short of detailing. I don't really want to jump back into filling these blocks yet until we really kind of know what's going on with this neighborhood in the back. I'm not 100% sold on it right now, and the only reason for that is really because it ended up pushing really close to the edge of the collector. So, you know, I think we can reshape, redevelop when we come in to this backside lotting here. And right now we really don't have any kind of residential demand to kind of push that redevelopment. So, I mean, it might come in if we just wiped it out, but I think we can wait for a more natural entry point there. So let's go ahead and jump the collector and start looking at this side of town. Okay, well, let's Get rid of a few of these. I'd end up having to come in and wipe these off the map. A little much. Let's jump over to Main Street B. And I think a little bit continuing, but also a little bit more growth. I think we can go ahead and kind of plop a Burger King in on this side of town. And then I think we have an advanced auto on that side, so I think we're about due for some competition. And then I think on this side, as we're starting to see a little bit higher end development right there, I think we could probably go ahead and commit to that a little bit. And I like that building. It's a vanilla university campus building, but it's not too big, but it's showing some growth. So that's kind of my take on the size of it, because we're at about 4,800 residents. We're starting to be, I'd say, not a small sleepy town, but we're definitely getting a little bigger, but we're still keeping that small town footprint in mind. So I think now we can jump back into a little bit of kind of, I'd say, still that old town feel, and kind of like to leave maybe some space in there for pedestrian pathways. Then we can kind of keep moving. That one connects. That looks good. And then we can put in this one, that one more. And I think that gives us a little bit of an extension of older building style. We're seeing some development around it that's on the newer side, so I think that feeds pretty well. But before we go too far in, let's go ahead and get some pavement down, make sure our water lines are in place to kind of seamlessly build through. Well, I think this block, where it's kind of somewhat centered up, where we did some alternating street connections, I think right here is where we can kind of establish our county administrative courthouse kind of block. So let's come in and put our county seat down. So this is just the tax office. I think it kind of gives that courthouse feel pretty well, and it kind of also keeps us in a vanilla asset, which is always nice. Then I think now we can look at supporting buildings here. So I think we definitely need to kind of start addressing some of our services, as in police, healthcare. We've been a little ignoring them slightly, but not to any means that's hurting the town. So I think probably can scoot this over. I think we can definitely take advantage of this whole block as kind of all county, all town administrative. So this kind of gives me that lawyer's office or court administration kind of feel. So I think it kind of fits in well with the theming of it all. And then one thing that we have not added while we have all the post sorting in our industrial park, we don't have an actual post office. So I think we can go ahead and put that in and kind of get that moving. Okay, so I think we can now kind of look at this as another aspect to the courthouse block. And, you know, I think a good plaza off the back makes sense. Gives place for people here waiting on anything they can wait on, or just administration taking a break. But I think it fits in here pretty nice. And we might come in and bob the trees and make that look a little, I don't know, less odd to the normal tree growth in the area. Now I think what we're lacking on this side is definitely parking. And now I think in this right off the block is where we could definitely fit a bigger administration building. And it's not huge, massive, but it's still substantial. But I think without really breaking the majority of the theme we have going. So now this is like a unique building. So it really acts more just as a park. We might jump into Rico at some point if we need to, and we can make this functional. And it'd be a lot more realistic if it was. So that might be something we do down the road. Well, I think that takes care of our initial block, our kind of administrative courthouse bill here. You know, it coming into town, it's a little in there off the main collector, but still very prominent, very centered. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. So I think we can start to look to continue to develop this out and develop out the rest of our already built grid from the last episode. So I think with our next block, we can start to look at continuing the commercial footprint of things. I think we'll put this on the main street, and then we can do some store frontage right off of it. And I think that's a pretty good looking building set. They kind of fit together well. I think we could move into some restaurants a little bit. And might scoot this over just a hair. And I think we'll need a little bit of parking. And I know parking is definitely dead space, but at the same time, it's a necessary evil. At least in small towns specifically. I mean, even in the future, if we do add some bus lanes to this town, it's going to be very minimalistic. Okay, so we have a little bit of shopping. We have another gas station. I think that makes a lot of sense. We have two now without overkilling it. Maybe something on the very outskirts of town. We can find room for one. But I don't think we're at any kind of size that we just need a mass amount of gas stations. Now, I think in here we'll leave it kind of open. Leave it open for pedestrian pathing. But I think we can get into something a little unique and fun. So we have this sunken Plaza shopping mall, and it's a pedestrian area, but it's, I think, a really cool asset, especially vanilla. But I think while it's definitely grand, it's small as far as height. And I think it's pretty neat. I think we can definitely still keep the small town vibe and still accommodate this. Short of some parking, which we'll probably put some in behind it. I think now we're definitely lacking the larger grocery store type build, and I think right here, I think it's a pretty good place for it. You know, we're off the high school. This is a interestingly unique lot, but it still has a very square gridded front face. So I think we can definitely take advantage of that, and I think with the high school here and the apartments back here, I think we could still run some food and some unique type blocks through here. So I think we'll go ahead and put in a parking lot. That's about halfway on the street, so I think that'll work out. But I think a food line would be well served over here. And it starts getting us a little bit outside of just hometown stores. I think that gives us a pretty good footprint off the high school, off Main, and still in good proximity to the primary housing. And while we're doing a parking lot, I think we need to go ahead and put a good sizable one back here. I think that's more than enough, and it's tucked in behind, so I think that works out okay. So I think from here we have kind of an interesting room off the high school, off of all this primary. I think it is a good spot for a hotel. But I think it, you know, it's not a big giant hotel. I think it fits this backside real well, and you know, and we are looking out toward the water, you know, so I think that's a good little sneak in hotel. So I think from here we can kind of wrap out right here a little bit. I think we have a pretty good footprint here. I think we're taking care of the interesting block usage that we left ourselves. And you know, we're not overdeveloping either. I think we're still in pretty reasonable shape, and we're keeping our demand in check. But I think from here there's a couple ways I like to increase the density a little bit. I think a little bit with housing and more kind of tuck-in apartments in a sense, just taking care of these interesting land uses. But I do think we can have a little bit of supportive businesses in this little nook right here, because it's definitely an odd little place, but short of just making it woods, I think we can kind of sneak a business or two in. And I think that gives us just a little nook of businesses right here off the edge of everything. So let's add a few more and get these blocks kind of pushed a little deeper. So I think right here, being that this is a very town/county centric block, I think we could do another library and kind of help still support our education usage, which we're not getting very much usage, but I think the actual vanilla one kind of gives us the more administrative feel. I think that'll work well there. Now, while we're kind of on the civic public side of things, I do think that we need to keep in mind our fire departments, because right now we only have one and we're really stretching. And right now we have really poor coverage out here and we don't really have much over here. So I think this will do us some good right here. While it still has some lapses, I do think some of our custom assets I have in here, these little smaller, we can start to kind of place them as we see fit, especially as we continue to build out our depth and find different use cases. I kind of always think that that's the more organic way of building. And speaking of our high school, I'd kind of been thinking about this no man's land here and trying to justify this roadway. And I think a park would do us well, but I think a skate park. So I think that's interesting, and I think it fits well. Fits well enough for the size campus we have. So let's jump back over here, because I think we're now at a kind of an odd use case of where our blocks are standing. And I think we can kind of take advantage of these kind of cut-in blocks. And I think we can take advantage of it with some housing. So I'm going to stay off just a little right here, because I'd still like to work in some pedestrian pathways. Kind of like we did over here, which I think some of this get redeveloped and now that we've kind of filled this side in, but for now I think that'll kind of take care of it and give us enough room. And we might have to reshape those here in a second, but I think that'll start to figure out where our footprint needs to be on them. Okay, well, I think that gives us a little bit of extra bump in housing and for our population, and kind of keep this at bay without kind of breaking the small town vibe either. You know, this is just a small little 4-apartment complex, sneak in right behind the main street land, so I think that works out pretty cleanly. And I think we can also add in one right behind the fire department as well. Well, and that gives us another little patch of housing that's kind of blending in and not really being this big dramatic development, but also still supporting the same growth pattern we have right here, at least to me. So now we have a decent little bit of housing out here without being too developed or too large looking. But I do think that we can go ahead and put a few amenities. Not necessarily more town amenities, I would say, than apartment building amenities, but I still have to also bob these just to make them look like they fit in. And I think our fire department could benefit from a parking lot. And I think right now that puts us in a really good place for detail. So let me kind of wrap that out and let some of these new residents fill in and traffic resettle, and we'll kind of evaluate where we stand after the detail pass. Okay, I think Ridgewater has definitely added a lot of good growth, good expansion. Still in that smaller footprint though. This is pretty much our biggest building in town as far as height. And so I think we expanded our services. Postal, we're going to have to expand that a little further. That reach isn't going to really get it done, but I think we can do that as we move into this side of town and a little bit more than just filling in Main Street a little bit. But once we kind of get this kind of dealt with and developed a little bit more permanently, I think we can kind of address those service needs. Death care is in real good shape. We've added to our police force. Not saying that it's perfect by any means. 7% is not too bad. We're pretty good on jail capacity, but we can always get that coverage a little better. Schools have settled back in now that we've kind of broken our initial growth, so they're back in a pretty normal usage, so I think we're in good shape there. I still think we could be looking out for a good place for another elementary school, especially on this side of town now that we're getting households and development moving into this side. But I think from a detail standpoint, I had a little retention pond just because there is a lot of parking and pavement out here. We have a lot of footpaths now, a lot of pedestrian, and we're seeing good usage. Really through here very well. And the more we can kind of keep that path and that movement going, the better we're going to be. Now, we might find that this is a little much. We could think about bridging it, but that's kind of tough financially on a small town. To build just a pedestrian pathway across is a lot. So we'll just have to kind of see where we head. But I think this is a very good start to getting this side of the town moving in development and catching back our original footprint. We spent a couple episodes there, very reactionary, getting budget income under control, getting jobs under control. And so we kind of had ignored what we initially put down, but I think we're heading back in the right direction, and I think this gives us a good place to keep growing organically. We covered a lot of ground in this build, and hopefully it gives you a few practical ideas to take back into your own city. I'll leave you with the final tour so you can take in the details. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.